Hey guys, this is Teddy Smith, and in this video I'm going to be covering modified internal rate of return. So down in the description I have a Google spreadsheet with an example for modified internal rate of return. So make sure you pull it up because that's what I'm going to be using in this video. In this video I also expect that you have some knowledge of how internal rate of return works. You know how cash flow works, and you have a basic understanding of Excel spreadsheets or how to use a spreadsheet. Also, it took me a while to make this video, so make sure give it a thumbs up, and if you like stuff like this, make sure to subscribe because I'm always coming out with videos like this. So, modified internal rate of return is essentially a more sophisticated version of internal rate of return. Internal rate of return, believe it or not, is actually a fairly unsophisticated, and it tends to screw up in many situations. Sometimes you'll be using internal rate of return and you will just look at the IRR it gives you and you will just instantly say in your mind that cannot be correct. There's no way that that the return is that high or the return is that low. And that's because it's not really important to the understanding of internal rate of return, but the equation itself can have multiple solutions. So what some really smart people did is they created modified internal rate of return. And in doing that, they added two variables to the internal rate of return to make it less likely or being less prone to screwing up and throwing out a return that just isn't actually real or realistic. And modified internal rate of return is used mostly with properties that have extremely volatile cash flows. Internal rate of return especially doesn't work right when you have really volatile cash flows, like a positive cash flow one year and then next year you have a negative cash flow. That's when internal rate of return actually begins to start screwing up. So the two things that they added were the financing rate or the safe rate and the reinvestment rate. And people get tripped up with these two extra added variables, but just look at it like this. The financing rate, aka the safe rate, is what is going to be used to discount the negative cash flows. If you remember anything, just remember this. Safe rate is used for negative cash flows. And it kind of makes sense. So you're going along here, you've bought this property for $10,000 and you're plugging along. Cash flow first year was negative $50,000. So you had to do some renovations to the property and you had to take that money out of your pocket. You couldn't pull it out of the stock market because you don't want to do that. You probably had to pull it out of a savings account or some other type of very liquid investment in order to pay for the renovations or whatever bad happened. Say you had to cover the mortgage. And that's why they call it the safe rate or the financing rate. Basically, when the shit hits the fan is what I call it, or when the economy tanks and you lose a tenant, you had to pay for that money out of pocket and you probably had to reach into a liquid asset in order to pay for that negative cash flow that you had. Okay, so we're plugging along here. Oh God, year 4 HVAC system goes out and you had to pay for that money out of pocket once again. So you had to reach back into your savings account and pay for that. And they call it the safe rate is because that's the interest is that you're going to get on that savings account or that very liquid asset. So whatever basically that you would have on your savings account or whatever you would use to pull out that money is what you're going to use as a safe rate. So just think about it like that. The next variable that we have in modified internal rate of return is called the reinvestment rate. And people have an easier time understanding this because this is what you're going to discount the positive cash flows. So you're rolling in the dough, you got past that first bad year and boom, you got $50,000 cash flow. Way to go. So what are you going to do with that $50,000 cash flow? You're a good investor, so you're going to put it in the stock market or some other higher return but less liquid and higher risk asset, just like any other investor would. So think about it like that. The reinvestment rate is what you're going to apply when you are reinvesting at a higher rate. So my reinvestment rate for me personally is I'm going to reinvest my positive cash flows in the stock market, and the stock market usually returns about 8%. So that's what I use for my reinvestment rate. And in the example that we have here, like I said, it's very volatile, and we've got some positive and some negative cash flows here. And the last year we sold it for $250,000. That IRR comes out to 24%. You know that's not right, and it just doesn't sound right when you just look at it. And when you apply the MIRR, or the modified internal rate of return, you get 10%, which sounds more likely, or it sounds more correct as opposed to the IRR. So that's pretty much it. And but anyway, I hope that you guys like this video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up. I'm always coming out with stuff like this, so make sure to subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.